Hello and welcome. I'm Arnold Naidu filling in for Riz Khan. On today's show, we look back at the life and legacy of the Palestinian poet, author and political activist Mahmoud Darwish. The celebrated writer died earlier this week in Texas of complications from heart surgery. Mahmoud Darwish composed his first poem at the age of 12, going on to publish more than 20 volumes of poetry. He lived a life of resistance and was jailed several times by the Israelis. He was a member of the PLO and wrote the Palestinian Declaration of Independent Statehood in 1988. His works earned him a number of literary awards and were translated into 20 languages. On Wednesday, thousands of mourners attended his state funeral in Ramallah in the West Bank. Don't forget, we take your calls on the show. You can reach us at the numbers there at the bottom of your screen. Now, joining me today as we take a look back at his life are from New York, playwright, writer and poet NATHALIE HANDAL. She teaches in the United States and around the world. Her book, The Lives of Rain, was shortlisted for the Agnes Lynch Starrett Poetry Prize. From our studios in London, I'm joined by novelist Adaf Sweif. In 2008, she initiated the first Palestine Festival of Literature. Her book, The Map of Love, has been translated into more than 15 languages. And on the telephone with me from San Antonio is award-winning poet, songwriter, and novelist NAOMI SHIHAB. Welcome to all of you to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Adaf Sweif, let me start with you. You wrote a piece in the British newspaper The Guardian in which you said, "None of us really thought he'd die. Our loss is great." Let me ask you this. Mahmoud Darwish was a great poet, but he was a lot more than that, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, he was an icon. I mean, it was because he was a great poet that, and because of the positions that he took in life, that he became an icon not just for the Palestinians, but for the Arab world. And I think really more than that, for people all over the world who are interested in liberation.
NATHALIE, Mahmoud Darwish was buried today, Wednesday, in Ramallah in the West Bank, as we've just been reporting. What has Palestine lost with his passing?
I think Palestine and the world actually has lost a cultural icon. And Mahmoud, what made him so extraordinary is that he transcended his symbolism, his own self. And although he brought Palestine and the Palestinian tragedy to the world with his work, but most importantly, he brought the world to a space where, of human consciousness, to a space where we can all interact, where we can all unite. And I think his work, in some sense, undivided us.
Adaf, tell us about Mahmoud Darwish's early life. He was born before the State of Israel was created in a place which is now part of Israel.
Al-Birwa, yes, in the Galilee. He was born in 41. So he was 7 when his village was attacked and they were forced to flee. And he has written and spoken about it, about finding himself in a different place and as a child not understanding what was going on, and then finding himself in Lebanon. And then a year later, the family smuggled themselves basically back into what had become Israel, and he went to school in a village called Deir al-Asad, which was near his old village, and that's really where they settled. But having lost everything, having lost the life that they had, the fields, the possessions, and having become refugees in their own country.
And did that initially drive him to join the resistance against Israel?
He joined he first, of course, he went through the sort of Israeli educational system, if you liked, because that's where he was. And his resistance took the form of joining the Israeli Communist Party as a very, very young man. And he was from the beginning a writer. I mean, he was writing poetry while he was still a child at school. And for the Communist Party, he edited their journal. And he was eventually under house arrest for about 6 years by the Israelis, a house arrest that was renewed every 6 months. And eventually he went to Russia on a course to Moscow, on an academic course to study, and he stayed there 11 months and then he went to Cairo, and from then on, really, he just moved where the resistance moved, and he was part of the PLO. And as you said in the introduction, he wrote the sort of statement of independence for Palestine later. He split with the PLO, of course, over Oslo, as other people, including Edward Said, did.
Well, let's bring in NAOMI SHIHAB now. She's talking to us on the telephone from San Antonio in Texas, here in the United States. NAOMI, Mahmoud Darwish's close friend, Edward Said, the Palestinian writer and critic, described him as the Palestinian envoy to human consciousness. How would you describe Mahmoud Darwish?
Well, I love that quote from Edward, and I described him once as the essential breath of the Palestinian people, and I think that was definitely true, that people who feel in exile or misunderstood or not listened to, not respected, they need to feel that there is a breath that they all belong to, some wider collective country of breath that belongs to them. And I know for my father, his poems took that place in his heart and his belief. You could read a Darwish poem and feel that somehow you were a citizen of that country of the poem. So I think his embodiment of the liberating power of language, which affects, as many of you have said, so many people of different backgrounds, not only Palestinian people, is one that at such a moment rivets us with its transcendence, how much we need a voice with that kind of power.
Do you think that his writings took a little too long to be, was his exposure to other parts of the world, did that take a little too long?
Well, I've been getting messages from all over the world, so it seems that many people have been reading him for a long, long time, and he's certainly a part of the canon. I remember, when I was a teenager, and I guess Darwish was only in his 20s at that point, my father was already very conscious of his voice and reading poems in Arabic and doing line-by-line translations to me because he knew I loved poetry, and he would say, this is a voice we need to listen to. And I think wherever Darwish's words went, people could feel that in them, that integrity and that necessity.
Let's go to NATHALIE HANDAL. She's in New York in our studio there. NATHALIE, what did Mahmoud Darwish write about? Was it simply confined to the Palestinian condition?
I don't think so. I think Mahmoud actually wrote about the small gods around us, whether he was writing about, a cup of coffee, a bird, a woman in high heels, groves, the olive trees. I think he was very much rooted in the earth and in life and the pulse of consciousness.
One of the poems that he wrote was for Muhammad al-Dura, the Palestinian boy who was shot as he sheltered behind his father. We saw those pictures on our television screens throughout the world. Why did that particular poem strike such a chord across the world?
Well, I think, for the evident reason in which, it touched us. Not only, it touched Palestinian, it was a Palestinian boy who had died, but if you were a father, a mother, that grief we can associate with. And obviously the power of Mahmoud's words.
Adaf, his poetry, he became the voice in many respects of the Palestinian resistance to Israeli occupation from a literary sense. Did his writing evolve over the years of occupation?
Absolutely, definitely, yes. I mean, the first poem that brought him to everybody's attention was written in '64, and after 1967, it became a kind of anthem for the Arab world, Sajjal Ana Arabi, record I am an Arab. But in fact, I mean, his poetry went through many stages, and I think that that perhaps a central thing to remember and to honor about Mahmoud Darwish is that he was very overt in saying that that being part of the resistance or having a cause did not mean that whatever you wrote was good. I mean, he insisted on the excellence of poetry, on the professionalism, if you like, of his trade in the face of everything. And he had a famous thing where he said that however sacred the cause, and our cause is sacred, it does not give us aesthetic immunity. And I think, in fact, that one of the things that informs his poetry and that makes it so reach into our hearts is that he was, in a sense, he was fighting as a poet against the constraints of having always to write about sort of worthy subjects. I mean, he again once insisted on his right to play or to be absurd, and that not every time he wrote about a woman he should be taken to mean Palestine. So he was totally involved with Palestine. I mean, that was his life, and at the same time he was trying to write amazing poetry that transcended, that went beyond the specific while dealing with the specific. And he wrote, we had the first International Palestine Festival of Literature last May, which NATHALIE was at, and NAOMI should have been at. Maybe she'll come to the next one. And he wrote a wonderful address for us in which he spoke about the difficulty of being a Palestinian and the difficulty of being a Palestinian poet, and how you had to be true to your reality and portray it and speak for the Palestinian situation, but at the same time be true to your craft and resist banality on behalf of the words that you used. And it was this tension, really, I think, between the freedom demanded by poetry and the constraint demanded by political engagement that actually created the amazing poems that he wrote, which millions of people know by heart and speak so much to all of us.
We're talking about the life and legacy of Mahmoud Darwish, the Palestinian poet who died earlier this week and was buried in Ramallah in the West Bank today. We're going to take a short break now. Stay with us. We'll be back with more on the legacy of this Palestinian poet in a few moments. Stay with us.